if you're trying to save up to start a business, if you're just trying to save up that $2.5 million retirement nest egg that you're going to need in order to make it from whenever you retire to whenever you die, which could be 30 or 40 years. Grow math could quite possibly derail all of your goals. At the very least, it's probably enough to cause you an extra 4 or 5 years, if not more, of working at the end of your career because of the thousands of dollars every year that you're just kind of mindlessly spending. So it is, it's funny. There's some great memes out there. Obviously, there's great memes for everything, but it's also really disconcerting. Sorry. Welcome to Service and Wealth, the podcast dedicated to helping military personnel master their finances and achieve financial freedom. Our mission is to guide you through the ins and outs of planning, saving, and investing, and most importantly, how to balance savings so you can enjoy life now and retire with confidence. All right, let's go. Man, September just flew by. We were doing the blended retirement system series where each week we did a podcast talking about, actually the first week of September, I did sort of like my money story just to try to let folks know why I talk the way I do and think the way I do about things like debt or real estate or cash management, budgeting, stuff like that. Like some people they might never really take it seriously or even think about it because they may never have actually ever gotten down to that point where they had $2 cash in their pocket and had a credit card bill that was, 4 times what they had in savings and they were a student unemployed, right? Like if you've never been down to that level, maybe budgeting isn't a big deal. But then eventually it catches up with you in life. And the more that you kind of ignore it, the bigger problem it'll be when it finally catches up with you. And so, here we are as we come in October. We kind of take a breath after the BRS series because, there are a lot of numbers to talk about. There's a lot of technical stuff. We were talking about tax strategies to think about, and if you were out there listening, you were thinking to yourself, "This is too much. I can't handle it. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to take the easy way out." Just remember that, 50 hours of self-education or even, guided education in finance has been shown to pay you back with over $100,000 more in your net worth. Now, in America in 2022, 2023, 2024, wherever we are right now, $100,000 in net worth is no small laughing matter. Right? In fact, the average net worth of a middle-class American household, we're not just talking like a single American, we're talking about a household. Their average net worth is about $145,000. So if you continue to invest the time and the effort into learning about finance, and we really hope that you're learning here on our channel and with all of our other, our blogs and our book and upcoming book and all of our products, that's more than enough. If you just stick with the Military Wealth Coach, you'll get more than 50 hours of financial education and high quality stuff too, right? I mean, not to pat myself on the back, but I'm not just hawking recycled stale advice or, I'm not like a 25-year-old sitting, in my apartment, just trying to become a social media influencer. I'm in my mid 40s. I've been studying economics and finance, doing it for a quarter of a century. And so, I think I've got the kudos or the credentials. And then, I also kind of give myself kudos because I'm sort of that nonconformist. And so I look at all this stuff and I challenge it. And, that's why we wrapped up we didn't just wrap up, the whole month about talking about BRS was talking about doing things that most people won't do. Right. And the whole point, I explained all of it. I gave you the examples, but you can even without having listened to those podcasts or understanding it completely, you can take a step back and still kind of like get it, right? If everybody is doing it, it doesn't make it right. If all the lemmings are running to the edge of the cliff like they do every, whatever it is, like 7 years in Greenland, don't follow them off the edge of the cliff. Back in the American West, up until even just, about 150 years ago, before like hunters from the East came out with their high-powered rifles and trains and stuff and almost killed every last buffalo in North America. There were 30 million of them, and the most popular way to hunt them was you just run them towards the edge of a cliff, just like a lemming. And you get that herd, and they get scared, and they'd see the other bison were galloping in that direction, and they felt safe with the herd, and they're like, well, everybody's doing it. It must be fine. Oh, that old buffalo who, Grandpa Buffalo, he's running to the edge of this cliff. It must be fine. I'll just max out my Roth TSP every year and have no cash and go into debt, or I won't take advantage of the traditional TSP to lower my taxes in certain years and then do tax-free rollovers when I'm deployed to a combat zone. Oh, the people who sell me BRS come and say, don't take the lump sum. You're going to have less money over the course of your life. I mean, those are the same people who are in that herd of buffalo or in that I don't know, what do you call a bunch of lemmings, like a flock of lemmings, run into the edge of the cliff, right? And I've explained to you, if you don't run with them and you follow a separate path, there's a better path. And everything in finance comes down to math, which means there's a right answer. There's a right answer you can get for your specific situation. And so, that was kind of like a big, deep technical month of talking. And, quick plug, I realized, like, you get in, we're all people of habits, right? And so on the one hand, the reason why I'm thinking about that is I'm trying to remind myself the last couple podcasts to switch up the order in which I promote things, right? Like, I keep saying, like, go to our website, like, at the very end when I'm, like, watching the clock and I'm like, oh, gosh, you got to hurry up and finish. And I told myself, like, you're getting in a habit, and that habit's not necessarily good because sometimes you forget your disclaimer, and then people might get mad at you. Sometimes you forget to plug the website or anything else, and so I want to just upfront say, if you want to continue on with your personal financial education, head over to our website. It's militarywealthcoach.com. Right there on the splash page, you can sign up for our mini course. You can there'll be a pop-up to opt into our newsletters. You can even sign up for a free consultation. We'll jump on. The last time Zoom didn't really work. I think it's because I've got to sort my accounts out, right? But we can do Zoom, we can do FaceTime, we can do Google Meets, or we can just do like a Skype call, whatever works for you. And you just bring your problem, and we'll talk about it, and we'll see if there's a way I can help. And if it's a big problem, then you might want to, retain me as a coach for a few months to work through it. And, maybe it's helping you get into real estate investing, give you 5 hours of my time to, like, help you find a house and make sure you get a good deal. Or maybe you just need a few hours to get, like, your budget fixed, and I will do it for you, right? So there's those kind of things you can get on the website. And then you can also, you'll see links to all of our social accounts. And so as we have kind of, like, ramped back up posting on Insta and TikTok and X and LinkedIn and Facebook and stuff like that, just to try to, like, get the content out, now that we have a library of content, follow us over there and let us know what you think, and let us know what you want to hear us talk about. And that's kind of the second part of habits that I'm thinking about for today. And it comes from a DM that came in to us from Instagram, and it was like, it requested a topic for the podcast. And I was like, well, this was a couple weeks ago. I was like, I can't do it. My mind is all wrapped up in the blended retirement system and thinking about strategies and how we remind ourselves of, like, all the little tips and tricks and rules and get around it and make ourselves more money so we can either have a better retirement or an earlier retirement, right? And what what the topic request, I'll get to it in a second here. I don't want to like throw it out there because then everybody will go down a rabbit hole, right? I guess maybe I'm already down one. But the other part of habits that this made me think of is that like as much as personal finance is about numbers and math and like logic and like it's a square hole and you've got a square peg. And what I mean by that is like if you make $50,000 a year, and then once you include FICA, which is your Social Security, Medicare taxes, which come out at 7.65% between the two of them, and then your federal income tax. And if you're in the military, hopefully you are not living in a state where you're paying state income tax, right? Like that is the dumbest thing you could do because you're constantly moving around. And there's, I can't remember the exact number. I think 38 states either have no state income tax, they don't have state income tax on military pay, or they give you credits and deductions to offset your taxes on military pay. So there's like 38 states out there that, and most of them are like military friendly because they got a lot of military bases, like the Texases and the North Carolinas and stuff like that, where you can establish residency and then you can keep it, right? Once you're in the military, if you start moving around, you don't have to move your residency to a new state every time. Not at all. Just get a driver's license in that state and then keep it. And every time you move, it's a military move. It's not, you don't have to change residency. You don't have to get a new license because of things like the Service Member Civil Relief Act. So anyway, you earn $50,000, you're going to pay 7.65% in taxes, and your average tax rate on your federal income tax with that, if you're, assuming you're single, it's probably going to be like about 11.5%. And so we're talking at the low end, like 19% of your income is going to be tax. So after 50K, you're left with about 40K to live. You should save half of it, right? But that's for a later topic. But if just from like the logic versus habit thing is if you're making $40,000, you can't spend more than $40,000. Like it's kind of a simple equation, And habits can get really bad. And if you don't start at the beginning and you don't start with good savings plans, savings rates, saving habits, and you make that $40,000 and you spend $39,870 of it, when you get the pay raise, when you get a higher BAH, or you finally get allowed to move out of the barracks out in town and get BAH, you finally realize that like you're getting ripped off by military housing authorities that keep all your BAH for themselves while they own the land, and you pardon my language, but you get shit maintenance service and you get shit property management service out of them, and you're just like, well, it's free housing, I guess you got to take it. No, you don't, right? Like those are all bad habits. They're habits, they're mindsets, and they're all bad. But if you get out of it and you start breaking out of them and you get more money and you get promoted and you get more money, but you've always spent your maximum budget, you're always going to do it. And that's why, over the last 3 or 4 years, the average American household savings rate is only 3.8%. Even if they're making more money, the savings rate's not changing because they're in this bad habit of spending more money. And so what I realize is like, man, as much as I like to just talk numbers and be like, look, dude, babes, whatever. I forget who told me that one time, they're like don't, you can get way past any concerns about offending somebody by like the dudes or the guys or stuff like that. Just call everybody a babe, right? Everybody will feel a little bit better about themselves. They're like, oh yeah, I am a babe. That's great. And it's gender neutral. It's even, works for non-binary. It works for everybody. Everybody's a babe. So anyway, the point is to say that like I tend to take in all of my products in everything that we put out there. I tend to take this like super mathematical and logical approach. Like if this is what you should do, then do it. If this is what the math says you have to save to get that, then you just have to save it. That's your new budget. But everybody has their own, their own habits, their own goals, beliefs, mindsets, and everybody has their own life circumstances. And one of the most complicated, difficult, sometimes exasperating, like you just want to like chomp your teeth down so hard that they break life circumstances is when you get in a serious relationship. You have a partner, you have a spouse, a wife, a husband, whatever you want to call it. Like I'll try to say partner. Please don't get offended if you think from your beliefs that I should say husband and wife, or from your beliefs you think I should always say like partner, legal partner. What I am who I am. So I'm going to say, I'm going to try to say partner out of like deference for people who have different relationships. But like if I say like your spouse or your husband or wife, like I'm not trying to offend anybody in any way. So, but anyway, once you like lock your life, you smash your life together with another person, now you come to not only having to like figure out both of your individual beliefs and habits, but you have to form like beliefs and habits together. And right now, I'm sure, well, I shouldn't say I'm sure. I imagine, because I was aware of it, right? So like if I'm aware of it and I'm in my mid-40s and like retired out of the Marine Corps, which is like the most, white bread, conservative backwater in the whole military, if I'm aware of this trend on like TikTok, then I got to think that most of you guys are. And if you can guess, right, I've been tiptoeing around it. It's just trying to like girl math, right? So once again, don't get offended if you're like girl math. That's sexist or that's judgmental. And the way I'll just break that down is, I used to use girl math all the time. It was like my weekly regimen. And let me give you some examples. So I'm going to call it girl math because that's what everybody on the internet calls it. But it doesn't mean only girls use it, right? Like anybody can use it. And it's like, honestly, it's like super, it's funny. But at the same time, if you're trying to save up to get a new car, if you're trying to save enough money to help your kids get into a good private school so they can get like admitted to West Point and get a free college education, and if you're saving up to buy your dream house back in your hometown, if you're trying to save up to start a business, if you're just trying to save up that $2.5 million retirement nest egg that you're going to need in order to make it from whenever you retire to whenever you die, which could be 30 or 40 years. Girl math could quite possibly like derail all of your goals. At the very least, it's probably enough to cause you an extra 4 or 5 years, if not more, of working at the end of your career because of the thousands of dollars every year that you were just kind of mindlessly spending. So it is, it's funny. There's some great memes out there. Obviously, there's great memes for everything, but it's also really disconcerting. Sorry. So what are some examples of girl math? What are some girl? So I just pulled up some like off of BuzzFeed and Reddit just to like see what they have as like the most popular ones. So here's one. Anything under $5 is free. We could call it insignificant, but not free, right? Here's another one. This is like from TikTok, the girl who's talking about it. She's like, if I return something at Zara for $50 and then I buy something else for $100, I actually only spent $50. Like not 50 more, but like 50 in total. Like the thing that was 100 only cost 50 because there was a return credit, right? A big one is if I buy something months in advance, like a concert ticket, by the time it comes around and I go, it's actually free because I don't have to pay to get in. Here's some others. If I preload my account, it's free. And here's something, what's really scary about that, and this is actually also super inspiring and impressive for anybody who's like kind of geeks out over business and numbers, is Starbucks, people think Starbucks is a coffee shop. Well, Starbucks kind of follows the McDonald's business model, which is it's actually a real estate business. They just want to buy up prime real estate, commercial real estate in the most highly appreciating areas all across the world. And the way to do that is, you buy a Starbucks, you build it for $3 million, get a local franchisee to come in and purchase it. And then they're paying you a monthly lease on it and profit share on it. Meanwhile, you still own the land, right, as Starbucks. Anyway, but what people don't realize is Starbucks also happens to be a bank. And it's because of the idea of this stuff, that money you preload on your card makes it stuff free. Well, each year over the past several years, and this in 2023, Americans loaded $1.6 billion onto their Starbucks cards. Which, I mean, that's like $60 per American, including children, right? So, that's like an average. Each of us throw like probably $150, $200 onto a Starbucks card every year. Well, 10% of that goes unused. And so what does that mean? Well, first of all, over the course of the year, there's a $1.6 billion circulating cash that Starbucks has to go out and build new franchises. And then, they don't really have to actually have it on anywhere when you go and, scan your QR code to get your coffee. They already had the money. They're already investing it. But they also, in 2023, claimed $181 million of gross profit just off of the Starbucks card, because 181 million out of that 1.6 billion, which is like over 11%, was never spent before the card expired. Right? So they're a bank. They take in all your money. They invest it. They build more franchises, and also they profited $181 million over those preloaded cards, and accounts, because you thought it was free, so then you didn't care about it. Some people like to, another example of girl math people like to, think about is if you pay with cash, it's free. You took the money out of your bank account once with your debit card, and that's when you spent the money. So now when you go give the cash to the store, it's already free, right? There's cost per wear justification, right? Like the more you wear it, the less it costs per time you wear it. Here's another good one, right? Another good one is avoiding delivery fees by spending more. So I'm sure everybody can relate to that. You go in there, you put one thing in your cart, and it's just a classic marketing upsell, right? It's like the easiest upsell any marketer, any web designer can ever do is, they show your cart in the upper right, and you put the thing you came to buy in your cart, and it's $19.99. And then it shows this little progress bar, and it shows your green bar goes up to 20, and then it shows at the end of the bar, it shows like $50, and it says free shipping with all orders over $50. And you're like, well, I'll just go back in and find something that's just over $30, and now I'll get that free shipping, right? Well, it's kind of funny because you're only going to spend $5 more on shipping, or maybe $7 or $8, and instead you justify saving that by paying, an extra $35 for something you didn't even want or need. But it's really tricky, right? It's really tricky to overcome, especially with the way that the algorithms and the AI are built in, and you can also picture that when you're shopping for like Amazon, right? Put something in your cart, and then right below it shows like customers like you also bought this, and you're like, oh yeah. And the reason why I say I used to live off girl math is, I've always been really big into like outdoor sports, whether it's like running or biking or mountaineering or rock climbing or skiing or boating or hiking, camping, like all that stuff. That's just sort of my thing that I've always been into. And for all of those hobbies out there, there is a huge world of gear. And I used to be like, I'd see maybe somebody on, either there's somebody out there like on the trail or like, on the road or wherever, and I'd see something they had, and I was like, oh, that's really neat. Or maybe I'd read on a website, like on a blog saying, hey, check out this new product, it's an improvement. Or you just see it like on socials, something being advertised to you, and you head on over to buy it. And while you're there, then you start like going down this path of like customers like you also were interested in this. You're like, oh, well, now I am interested. And I'd end up, putting like $400 or $500, sometimes a lot more, like in my cart and ordering it. And then I'd be like, well, I'm also going to go over to like backcountry.com and buy similar items from them. And then I'm going to get them and I'm compare them and I'm going to return what I don't like. Well, anytime you buy like 2 cool gadgets and then you like justified it by having to return one, once you get them in your hand, you're kind of like, it's kind of a pain to go to the, I got to log on. I got to get a return number. Then I got to put it in a box. I got to drive to the post office, and like you end up keeping it all. But I always used to, by my math, if I spent $600 on Amazon and then I returned a third of it and got $200 back, I was like, that's a good deal for me. Look at that nice little $200 back in my, back on my credit card. Oh, hey, that means I can, I can splurge this weekend and go get a couple of growlers at like the local bottle station, and that's all fake, it's not logical, right? But we all do it. And it's easy to just keep doing it in the bad habit. And there's no way to like really confront it, which is what makes it even harder. So, for example, because again, we're talking about like habits and we're talking about like beliefs and we're talking about behavior versus like pure logic and math. And so like, if someone says, oh, well, returns equal free money, you're not going to ever win by saying, if you're spending the refund, it's not free. It's just money being recycled back into more purchases. We needed that refund just to get back on budget. We're still over budget. Or you can't even, you could try to be sarcastic. Because when you say that, like they're going to be like, well, I got a refund. Right? Like that's all you're going to get back. And you can't, even if you try to be like a little bit sarcastic, I don't know if you're ever going to get anywhere if you're, and this, again, it doesn't even have to be with your partner. Like you can just be talking to yourself in the mirror because you realize you have a bad spending habit. And, you could try to be sarcastic. You could say like, oh yeah, the magical refund fairy is back. Oh my gosh. They brought back free money for us. Oh, no, wait, it's not free money. It's not the lottery. It was actually our money in the first place, and the store gave it back to us. Can we please just keep it? Right? It's really difficult. I can tell you that, again, the irony, I guess it's kind of an irony or a paradox, but I really kind of got all in like on this obsession with cutting expenses, getting to the point of having financial freedom when I was about 6 years out from my planned retirement from the Marine Corps. And I started to kind of forecast like how much I thought the pension would be, what I thought would be a reasonable amount of disability to collect. And I started to look at like the ways we could potentially save more money, invest more money, expand into real estate and other things that were paying us passive income or even active investment income. It didn't matter. I was just like, okay, when I retire from the Marine Corps, I do not want to go be a GS, like sitting right next in the desk or cubicle next to the one I'm in right now. Like, I just don't want to do that. In fact, I don't want to do any full-time office job. Fortunately, like COVID hit, and so now there's like small, like beams of light coming down in the work world and the job market where you can be full-time remote or hybrid remote. But like it was I who was really got obsessed with this idea of like, how can we get our expenses lower than our post-military income, and what do we have to cut to get there, right? And so, like, let's start tracking our expenses, and let's start seeing where we're spending things and where we can cut back and save. And at the same time, like, I probably knew it even before we started, But I was the one who had bad habits and out of control spending. My wife was the one who was always like looking at me like, why are there 6 boxes on the front steps? Did you really need to get that for your motorcycle? What is wrong with, the XYZ that we already had? And I was justifying with girl math. And so it was this weird tension where, like, my bad habits weren't going anywhere, even though I had this hope or this goal or this intention. And it wasn't until, like, my wife and I sat down and we started to really talk about it together and say, what are our goals? Like, do we want to be working for the next 30 years? Because if we stick on the track we were on, we're both going to have to work at least until 70 to get where we're going because we're spending too much money. We're like, no, that doesn't sound fun at all, right? Like, 1, working that long, but 2, just like spending that much time missing out on stuff, right? And we're like, let's make it a race. Let's make it a race to see how much we can save every year. Let's make it a race where we put in some goals. And that's where that really became the experience, right? Like the shared experience and the growth and everything that led to what's really unique about the budgeting system that we created at the Military Wealth Coach and that we promote and that we share with everyone who reaches out and does like a free consultation, who even before the MWC existed and was still just kind of like trialing it out while I was still in the Marine Corps. Like anyone who came to me for counseling or to talk about this stuff, like the system that I created for it, the budgeting system that I created, took advantage of this fact that, like, if you don't have shared goals and values, if you don't have something that you both are together working for, or even for yourself, if you're still just single but you find yourself every weekend spending a little bit too much here and a little bit too much there on stuff you don't really need because you're using girl math and you're buying things on sale or buying extra things to save on shipping or returning some things and using the credit to buy more stuff. If you're doing all that stuff and you don't have a big vision that you're working for, you're not gonna change, right? And you'll never overcome the girl math logic or illogic, whatever you want to. I'm not trying to diss it. Obviously, I just think it's not good. And so that's why we came up with a budgeting system called iCash, ICASH, and the I is identified dreams and goals. And one of the things we have in our workbook that we make available with our course, and then that we're also selling on Etsy, is the dreams and goals worksheet. And it guides you through how you have to like really be intentional. And it's super hard because when you're in your 20s and 30s, thinking about where you need to be in 20, 30, or 40 years is really hard. It's really hard. It's for some people it's hard to like even have a plan for next weekend. But the consequence is that you're gonna, in 20 or 30, 40 years, without this vision and bigger plan and goal setting, you're not gonna reach any of those goals. And I think that's what's a real tragedy, is that you might have experienced this yourself, or maybe you can kind of relate from talking to friends, or seeing it with your parents or family members, or maybe just seeing it on like a sitcom or in a movie, is a family sitting around the dinner table, or a young couple sitting in a field like on a sunny summer afternoon daydreaming, and they're talking about the house they're going to have and the car, and they're going to travel the world, and they're going to do all this stuff, and it's just dreams, right? They're just dreaming. And then on the daily basis they go back and they've got a $710 a month auto payment, because that's in 2023, 2024, that's the average monthly payment on a new car. And they're going shopping every weekend. They're using, partial refunds to credit more purchases, all this stuff. And it's not because anyone is dumb or careless. right? They just have bad habits and they don't have the dreams and goals to motivate them to make some changes. And so, as we, again, go back to our story, as we went through it, for the first 2 years of doing this, I wasn't really reining in my spending, and I was being scolded for it, and like I was reluctantly like returning things. We're cutting back in other areas, getting rid of the car payments, whatever the case may be. So we were making gains, but we didn't make like serious gains because we're still maxing out credit cards and missing out on chances to save a lot of money. And then we followed that first step. We finally came up with this goal where we're like, okay, this is, these are important things. We want to have this much money in retirement so that we can do whatever we want. In 15 years, we want to have this kind of asset, this kind of purchasing power, because it's not that we don't want our daughter to figure things out and make her way through life, but we don't want her to be held back for the next 25 years after she finishes college by paying for the student loans, because it's a racket. It's a scam between the Department of Education and university chancellors everywhere. Every extra dollar of financial aid that the U.S. government hands out to students in loans, universities boost their tuition 40 cents, right? So it's a scam. Like, if you send your kid off in 2045 or 2050 to go get a 4-year school at like Alabama or Texas A&M, it could cost $250,000 or more. And if they have to borrow that money, they're going to be screwed for 20 years, right? And so we wanted to have that sort of big goal. And these are way far out. And they were things that we always talked about, like, oh, yeah, we want to do that cool stuff. But it wasn't until we set down these goals, made a vision, figured out how much we needed to save to get there, and then made a budget, right? And so the first part, when you're dealing with that kind of stress and that kind of frustration with yourself looking in the mirror, or with a partner where, one of you is really set on saving and investing and growing wealth so that you can have total financial freedom and go do what you want and have this dream life that you visualize, and they're just every day just spending money recklessly, you got to first and foremost like bring them back to the table, sit down, have a money date night, get a sitter, have somebody watch the kids, go out and pull out, and just before you go, like, you never want to ambush somebody like this. You set it up. You're like, okay, look, we've got 2.5 hours by ourselves to go out. What I want to do is the first hour, I want to have a serious talk about our finances, our budgeting, our goals, like where we want to be and what we want to get to and how much we want to have and save. And then after that, we're just going to, like, at the 1 hour mark when the timer goes off on the phone, we're going to stop it. We're going to just relax and have fun. Or you can flip it around, right? But chances are, if you are finally getting away for a date night with your partner, it's probably going to start with like a happy hour. And, let's be honest, if you have a couple drinks, your ability to like be serious about like big goal setting is probably like a little bit diminished. So anyway, that's the first kind of, rather than just arguing about it, or I guess, worst case is like resenting the other person for it. You just got to get out there and like talk to it, right? Talk about it, come up with your shared dreams and goals, and put them on paper. And like I said, we've got a little dreams and goals worksheet that we've got available, and it sets it up by like different life phases, right? Like 1 to 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 10 to 20 years, 20 to 40 years, 40 years till you die, right? And that the farther away it is, the more squishy they can be. But the ones that as it gets closer, it's a lot easier to like put actual numbers on paper and then just do the math. Like, we want to have another kid, which means we're going to need to get a bigger car, and we're going to need to do that in the next 3 years. Well, there's a 3-year goal for you, right? We are going to get out of the military after this enlistment, or I'm going to retire in 6 years. Well, that gives you kind of a 5-year goal. Our child is going to graduate high school in 2032, right? Like 8 or 9 years away. Well, you've got like an 8 to 10 year goal. Hey, we want to be fully retired at age 60. It's not as late as most Americans who are working until like 62 or 66, in there on average. So we want to give ourselves a few extra years, in our 60s while we're still feel young, because 60 is relatively young, right? Because everyone listens is going to live to be 90 or 100. So, you can set up your goals and start working towards them. And that's where the budget comes in, right? And that's once you actually make it really super personal and something you can actually visualize and feel passionate about, like it's yours with your dreams and goals, then creating a budget is not hard. It doesn't feel bad at all. If you start with a budget, you just get a budget app and you're like, oh, look how much I spent. Well, that's probably not good, but who cares, right? Like that's the attitude. You got to start with the dreams and the goals and then build it from there. And here's one of the things that I wanted to do when I was kind of thinking about how to talk about this issue and look at this episode is I was like, I wonder what the average American budget looks like, because I know what ours is. Like, I know it extremely well. I even know our annual rate of real inflation or aka real lifestyle creep, right? Like, I can tell you that if with inflation taken into account from 2022 to 2023, our lifestyle creep was actually negative 0.9%. We spent about 1% less, right? For 2024, it's probably going to be about the same. It's probably going to be about net zero. But because we have this budget, as we make more money, we're actually staying on the same level of expenses, which is not a bad thing, right? Like, you don't need a new house every other year. And the more time that goes on, like the cheaper your mortgage gets relative to your income. So, there's a lot of ways that like you can keep lifestyle creep in check by not like going after the big things and always pushing your budget really high on housing and transportation and entertainment and food and stuff like that, and keeping those in check. And then along with it, like your other categories are going to go up a little bit, right? Like you'll spend a little bit more on restaurants. You'll spend a little bit more on like a family trip. You'll spend a little bit more on your subscriptions because the costs go up, and you're not going to ever get ahead if you just cut your Netflix subscription. Like you're going to save what, $150 a year? Like that makes zero difference in the long run. But if you can get rid of a $700 a month car payment, that is quite an accomplishment. And so, like, because I know our budget, but I've never compared it to the average American, right? Because I was like, just like talking about the bison and the lemmings, why be average? Why follow the crowd? We made a budget that was following our dreams and goals, set a savings rate that would allow us to get there, and then filled in the gaps behind there based on like what we felt was comfortable and needed. And as I've said before, like the major savings that we make are in housing and transportation. Why? Because those are the biggest categories for everybody. So just for illustration, right, I pulled out this is from Forbes. So Forbes did they always are publishing really good articles where they go in and they read things like the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey, which is, it's going to be like 100 pages of like blah, 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 and tables and data. And then they bring out like what matters, like the headlines, the wave tops, whatever you want to call it. And so this is stuff from 2022, okay? The average American spends 1/3 of all the money they spend 1/3 on housing. They spend another 17% on transportation. So 50% of the average American's budget is spent on housing and transportation. They spend another 25% on food and insurance. Now, I don't believe that because in this survey, they cite that the average family of 4 spends $12,000 a year in insurance. However, we also know from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that the average family of 4 spends $23,968 to buy health insurance under the American Affordable Care Act, right? The marketplace, the Obamacare. The average annual cost of their health care premiums is $24,000. So I think the numbers are a little bit off in a couple of these, but we don't need to get sidetracked on that. But anyway, They break it down. And so this is what's kind of fascinating to me is that when they break it down, they still find that on average, the savings rate is 3.8%. Like that's not something that's like FUBAR or made up. Like that's real. And so what they also have is they have it broken down by family size. And this is what really kind of fascinated me, right? So the average family of 3 in America in 2022 spent $86,265. That's a family of 3 that spent $86,000. Now, we already know that if you're like a married E5 with 1 kid, you're getting married BAH and you've got like 8 years experience, you're only making $63,000. So I know you're not spending that. In fact, you're right in between working class and middle class, so I know your expenditures are lower. But we're talking about average. So we're talking about somebody who is somewhere in the middle to the upper half of the middle class, right? Like somebody kind of right in the middle of America. And as it would have it, that's probably someone like a married 03 on BAH. Because somebody who's, an 03 who's married and getting BAH and has a kid is making about $115,000 before tax. And after tax, they're probably making, somewhere around $90,000 to $100,000. Somewhere in there, right? And so this is probably a little bit more realistic for them. Because the average American household makes less than $86,000, right? The average income for a middle-class family, and again, as a household, it's not just one person, is about $75,000, right? So it's a little skewed, it's a little high, but what I found really fascinating is that in 2022, the average household family of 3 spent $86,265. And our household family of 3 spent $87,345.60. So we spent, what's that? We spent $1,080.60 more than the average family. So it's pretty good. But then we look at the percentages, right? Because again, the savings rate for that average family of 3 is only 3.8%. They're only saving $3,200. And why is that? Well, it's because they start out with the stuff that they want and they need. They buy that, they spend as much as they can. The loan officer, the bank cons them into getting the biggest loan they can afford on a monthly basis. Boom, they're 33% spent on housing. The marketing and the Christmas, like how can you resist the Christmas, commercials for new cars that are coming out the new model year and they come blasting through the snowbank and then there's a big red bow on the hood and it pulls up to this like $8 million house in Crested Butte, Colorado. And then, this dude jumps out and he opens the back and a golden retriever puppy comes bounding out through the snow and, his wife's like, oh my gosh, it's a puppy. And, oh, I didn't notice you spent $60,000 on a Chevy, and then you go out and you're like, well, I can afford this. I got to put, $4,000 down and then the payments are only $700 a month. I can afford that. And boom, right? Like now you've got 17% of your expenses on transportation. It goes on like that, right? And then at the bottom you get 3.8%. Well, if you use the iCash budget and you start with your dreams and your goals and you put actual savings goals, you'll save first. Now in 2022, our savings rate was 42%. Some people might say like, whoa, I don't know how you did that. That sounds like a lot. Well, we did it because we set up our dreams and goals, figured out how much they cost, and then we started funding those savings first. And then once we funded the savings on that, whatever was left, we broke down and we budgeted. And when I say we budgeted, it means like you literally give yourself a certain amount per month that you spend. Now, the biggest impact we had was instead of spending 17% of our total budget on transportation, our total transportation spend was 2%, right? Because we paid cash for used cars, so we didn't have car payments. Our insurance was lower. We didn't have, I change the oil and I take care of the tires. And, there's some stuff you can do that will save you thousands of dollars a year. And then even housing was just 18.7%. So it was about 2/3, even a little bit less, like 60% of what the average household's budget's going to. But then we spent more. Like we spent more on shopping. We spent more on food and groceries. We spent a little bit more on education. We spent a little bit more on travel and entertainment. we still came in at the same total expenses, but we also have the amount of savings we had was crushing the average family, right? And it's where you start. And so, again, can't emphasize enough. You got to start by sitting down and having some real strong conversations, and you just say, like, why are we Henry? And if you haven't heard Henry, it means high earner, not rich yet. So basically, like, if you're a high earner, like, it's crazy, but somebody who's a married 03, just by themselves, if their partner's not working, they're making $115,000 before tax. That puts them in the upper middle class in America. That's putting them up in, almost the top quintile of incomes, right? So, like, people in the military, senior enlisted and mid-career officers on up, you're already, like, upper middle class. And by the time you're, just a lieutenant, like an 01, or by the time you're like an E6, like a staff NCO, like, you're in the middle class. And so you might look around the base town that you live in and not feel super confident about your financial position, but, like, you're doing a lot better than at least half of America, right? And so don't think that you're too poor or that you don't earn enough to, like, have dreams and goals and start saving big. And once you do that, you have to build in, like the iCash system. The I is identify dreams and goals. You do that, and then C is calculate the cost. So you've got to figure out how much I need to save. Oh, I need to save $600 a month into this high yield savings account in order to have $150,000 in 10 years that I can use to get my kid through college without debt, right? I've got to save $800 a month from age 20 to age 42 in order to make sure I have $2.5 million by the time I'm 60 so I can retire, right? That's a calculate. And then you automate those things. They automatically go in, and part of the automation is this is the budget. And once you agree on it, right, this has to be agreed upon up front. If you're dealing with if it's just you got to trust yourself. If you're in it with a partner, like, you got to agree on it. But you make sure you have a joint account and that you still have your individual checking accounts. And then your individual checking accounts get funded each month with the amount that you agree that person has to spend. And it's not, you have to talk about it and agree on it, because if you're just sitting there, like, let's just say you're in a situation in which you're the person who's working right now and you're making all the money because there's, like, 2 little kids at home, and with the cost of childcare these days, you're like, it's just better for my partner to, I'm putting on my uniform every day, I'm going to work, I'm coming home, let my partner raise the kids until they're, qualify for, like, preschool, so we don't have to spend $25,000 a year on childcare, right? Like, that's insane. It's bad for the kids, bad for your budget. Like, just deal with the lower income and figure it out. But if that's your situation, and then you come up with this budget and you're like, okay, between groceries, restaurant food, entertainment, and shopping, we're talking about the average family of 3 is spending, what did I say, food? Yeah, so groceries, restaurant food, entertainment, and shopping. The average family of 3 spends $17,000 on that per year, $17,500, which is $2,500 a month, okay? No, I'm sorry, that's wrong. $1,500 a month. Well, if you look at your budget and you're like, okay, you know what, that's okay, but we can actually get by on $1,000 a month. And then that's going to allow us to save an extra $5,500 this year. And if we do that for the next 3 years or 4 years, we're going to have enough to buy the new car we want, right? Like, we'll save up $16,500 over 3 years. We'll trade it in the old car, sell it for $10,000. Now we can go buy a better, bigger used car for $25,000 for our family plan to have another kid before we, PCS or whatever. So if that is the way that you agree that you're going to save some money so you can get to one of your short-term goals and upgrade your car, then you put $1,000 a month into that debit account. And that's for the person who's responsible for their groceries. They're responsible for paying for the restaurant meals out, for takeaway, delivery. And that's also what shopping has to come out of, right? Or subscriptions has to come out of it. And now that's your budget at work, right? If you just keep it all in one big pot, then it's, or you both are using the same credit card, then it's super easy to go over budget anytime and every time, because you just swipe the card or you just go get more cash out of the joint account, which had your full paychecks. It had $5,000 in there at the beginning of the month, and then, you paid rent or the mortgage and still has $3,000 in there, and you're still just spending it and going down. But you have to automate your savings and investments first, and then you have to budget. And budget is not just tracking, right? If it's just tracking, if it's just looking at an app like Credit Karma or You Need a Budget or something like that, you're not budgeting at all. You're just monitoring how much you spent and feeling regret. Budgeting is when you actually give yourself allowances for the different categories of expenses in your life. And if you do that, then it doesn't matter what kind of girl math goes into it, right? Like, if my wife had been, she just didn't want to, she wanted me to figure it out, which was really respectful and kind. But over the course of, 2 years, I spent probably $25,000 on Amazon. If she instead had been like, hey, look, when you're shopping on Amazon, I want you to just use your debit card. Or I want you to we're only going to pay the credit card out of this account, and this is how much we have each month. If she had set that limit based on our goals, I would have gotten to, halfway through the month and been like, oh, shoot, I already spent my $500. I don't have it. And it didn't matter how much girl math I would use. I could return whatever I wanted, and then I could use the credit to buy more stuff, but I could never go over that limit, right? I could buy 100 things for $5, and I would realize that they weren't free just because I ran out of money. And so, just to wrap things up, girl math it's just a way to excuse bad habits, but you can't ever say that to your friend or partner, or even, I guess you could say it to yourself, right? Like, have thick skin and just deal with it. But you can't take it on head on, right? And if that's a problem right now in your financial situation in your household, it's not worth arguing over. It's not worth, locking antlers and battling to the death. There's a better way. And the better way is to just set aside a pool of money within which girl math can do as much adding and subtracting as it wants. But at the end of the day, there's a limit to how much can get spent. And you just automate that every month in your budget, your iCash budget. You're like, okay, well, we've got to save this much, which means we've got $1,000 left over for food and entertainment and shopping, and it's in this account, and everything's got to be bought. And then at the end of the month, if you pull up the joint account, you see the joint account had a $75 debit to, Mike's Off-Road or Sephora or something like that. You can just ask your partner, why? What is this? We agreed not to do this. Why'd you do it? All right, that's my thought. Obviously it's heavily influenced by my own experiences, but I don't mean it in a biased way. I mean it in the fact that I was allowing girl math to break our budget every month for almost 2 years. And it wasn't until we really had shared values, shared goals, knew the cost of getting to them, and then automated our budget so that within it, I had an amount that I could spend on shopping each month, and I stayed within it, right? There was no option to get around it because I didn't have more money, right? Once the account was at zero, that was it for the month. And there's one final thing, this advantage of taking this approach to taking control of bad habits, knocking out the little, nickel and diming expenses in your lifestyle, is that when you have that pot of money that you have to look at and you have to spend out of, it doesn't feel good to watch it go down to zero. It'll actually change your habits and change the way that you act because you don't like it. If you're just spending on a credit card, numbers go up, right? If you're paying it off every month from a joint account and the numbers fluctuate between $1,000 and $3,000 a month based on like before or after the bills are paid, there's never any like warning signs or alarm bells going off. But when you have your checking account and each month you put, a certain amount into it, as it goes down, closer to zero, the closer to zero gets, the more anxious you feel and the more you're just going to like stop spending, right? And that was the big lesson for me, is that once we put those limits and those budgets in place, I changed my whole attitude. I was not spending it down to zero. Within a couple months, I was spending as little as possible and only buying the essentials. And before I bought them, I'd ask and, talk through it and be like, hey, I think we could use this. Here's here's an open box from Best Buy or a used one on eBay, so we can save some money that way. And it almost becomes like a fun little competition to be like, oh, I wonder, how I can spend less. And then at the end of the year, and this is where we'll wrap things up, and why it can still be rewarding, and why I always say, like, becoming a saver and saving helps you spend more, is at the end of the year, you look in there and you're like, wow, because I didn't spend all that money, we've got $1,500 in here that I was budgeted for spending or shopping, but like I didn't. We got an extra $1,500. What should we do? Well, get a couple cheap plane tickets and book an overnight, 2-night overnight hotel in New York and like go on a little trip. Treat yourself. Maybe, just finally upgrade something around the house, get a new TV, buy a PlayStation 5. I don't care. But it's all coming out of the shopping budget. And so at the end of the year, when you treat yourself or you buy some nice things at Christmas, it was money you'd already set aside and you're not digging into savings or doing anything else. And it really creates good habits. And then you give these good habits just like 1 year of seeing success, and it just becomes a part of the lifestyle. And that's why, even as we've earned more money and you get pay raises and promotions and BAH goes up, or there's another job or side hustle or real estate, like whatever the case, passive income kicks in. Even as the income's gone up, like our actual expenses have stayed the same now for, at least 4 years. Right, which is pretty cool, especially when you think of how much inflation has been in the COVID, post-COVID years. So, all right, hopefully, I did a good job. I don't want to say like treated the topic with respect. I don't even know what that means. It sounds a little bit condescending, as if I would know. So I hope that was an entertaining episode to talk about, and I hope also, more than anything, like it helped you to relate to what the Military Wealth Coach is about and our iCash budgeting system, which is, it's something that we introduce in our mini course, and then obviously like the first book I wrote, which is still just a draft because it was way too chewy and like technical, was trying to explain like how to set up your iCash and all your accounts and like very graphic, and so. I eventually am going to use that and make it available. But right now it's just kind of like, teaching and coaching notes, I guess, for everything else. So yeah, hey, it's been for me, it was a fun episode, fun topic to cover, and also like pretty fun to just do a little quick research before the show, just to like look at what the average American spends and see like, even if we make a lot more than the average American, or even if we make less, like, you can still kind of use it as a model for where are you out of control? Are you spending more than 12% on your budget on food? You're out of control. Are you spending less than 17% on transportation? Hey, give yourself a pat on the back. You're doing a good job at saving money in a big expense category. And you should be proud of what you're doing. And most importantly of all of it is, if your savings rate is 3.8%, go to my website, militarywealthcoach.com. Book a free consultation. Let's jump on Google Meets and let's talk about it. Because if you're only saving 3.8%, you're going to have to work for 80 years to afford retirement. All right, and that's just the math. See, I told you, it still comes back to right answers in math, right? But I want to help get you on the right flight path to where you can have a multimillionaire retirement and you can retire while you're still young enough to enjoy it. All right, guys, it's been another fun hour for me. Thanks for the suggestions. I'll keep, obviously keep looking forward to more coming in over LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook. Email me through the website, whatever you want. But until next time, stay financially fit and mission ready.